Hey everyone! So when you think about Jesus and his 12 apostles, a few names probably pop right into your head, right? Peter, John, maybe even Judas Iscariot. They're the headliners. But what about the other guys? Today, we're going to talk about two apostles who are famous for being almost completely silent. And yet, with just one sentence each, they managed to change everything.
And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. We're going to explore how two of the most overlooked figures in the New Testament, just by speaking up one time, shaped two of the absolute cornerstones of the Christian faith. It's an incredible story about how sometimes, the quietest voices are the ones with the most important things to say.
So out of the 12 guys who walked with Jesus day in and day out, several are pretty much unknown. They're on the list, they're in the room, but they never say a thing. They're just kind of there. Our first quiet witness is the perfect example of this. A man who followed Jesus for years, heard every sermon, saw every miracle, and never said a recorded word. Until one really, really important night. And that's where our story begins.
First off, we got to figure out who we're even talking about. And, well, that's a little tricky because this guy had 4 different names. In Matthew and Mark, he's called Thaddeus, which means courageous. Some versions call him Lebbaeus, which means heart. Luke calls him Judas, son of James, probably his actual birth name. And John, just to make sure we're all clear, calls him Judas, not Iscariot. So yeah, a man of 4 names, but he's known for just one sentence.
Okay, so picture this. The scene is the Last Supper. The mood is super tense. Jesus has just told them he's about to leave, and the disciples are confused, they're probably scared. And it's right here, in this incredibly heavy moment, after years of just listening and observing, that Thaddeus finds his voice. And this is what he asks. This is his one line in John chapter 14, and what a question it is. I mean, think about it. He's not asking about taking over Rome or who gets to be in charge. He's asking something way deeper. He's basically saying, okay, so how is this relationship we have with you going to work? How are we going to see you when the rest of the world can't? It's a question about the very nature of what it means to have faith.
And that one question from Thaddeus prompts this theological bombshell from Jesus. His answer, where he promises that he and the Father will come and make our home with them, introduces this revolutionary idea, divine indwelling. The concept that God wasn't just going to show up to his people, but that he would come and live inside them through the Holy Spirit. Without Thaddeus breaking his silence, this crucial teaching about God's personal internal presence might never have been explained so clearly.
So what does this one question tell us about the guy? Well, it tells us he was a deep thinker. He was spiritually minded, not caught up in all the political drama of the time. He was the kind of person who really needed to understand the how and the why of faith before he could fully jump in. He was the group's thinker.
Okay, so let's switch gears and meet our second quiet witness, Bartholomew. Now, if Thaddeus was the thoughtful questioner, Bartholomew is a completely different story. This is a guy who goes from sharp, cynical skepticism to absolute certainty in the blink of an eye.
And just like with Thaddeus, we've got to do a little name work first. Bartholomew was probably his last name, his surname. It means son of Ptolemy. Most scholars agree that his first name was actually Nathaniel, which means gift of God. It makes sense because in the Gospels, Bartholomew is always listed with Philip. And in the Gospel of John, we see Philip bringing his friend Nathaniel to meet Jesus.
So when his friend Philip runs up to him all excited, saying, "We found the Messiah and he's from Nazareth," Nathaniel's reaction in John chapter 1 is famously sarcastic. He just says, "Nazareth? Can anything good come from there?" This is not a guy who's easily impressed. He's an honest skeptic, and he's not afraid to show it. But then, something amazing happens. Before Nathaniel can even get his skeptical question out, Jesus sees him coming and says this, from John chapter 1, verse 47. He looks right past the cynicism and sees the man's heart. He's basically saying, now here is a man who is 100% genuine. What you see is what you get. No games, no hidden agenda. And for Nathaniel, this changes everything. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't a big speech that convinced him. It was the absolute shock of being perfectly and completely seen by a total stranger. In that one moment, all his walls of doubt just vaporized. And from that moment of being truly seen comes this incredible declaration from John chapter 1, verse 49. And you have to understand, this is the very first time in the Gospel of John that any disciple says this so clearly. He doesn't just call him a great teacher or a prophet. Nope. He goes straight to the ultimate truth of who Jesus is.
So Nathanael's sudden, heartfelt confession establishes this other cornerstone of faith, the divine identity of Jesus. If Thaddeus' question helped define how believers experience God, Nathanael's confession helped define who God is in the person of Jesus Christ.
So you've got two quiet men, two very brief moments of speaking up. One was a deep question, the other a sudden confession. So let's put them side by side to really see how powerful and, well, how perfectly complementary their contributions were.
Look at this comparison. It's pretty amazing. Thaddeus, on the one hand, was focused on how we experience God. His one thoughtful question leads us to the doctrine of God's indwelling presence. Bartholomew, on the other hand, was focused on who God is. His one honest confession leads us right to the doctrine of Jesus' divine identity. One is the understanding disciple who needed to think it through. The other is the transparent disciple who just needed to see the truth. Two totally different guys, two different paths, but together they give us two unshakable pillars of faith.
And that's really the beautiful symmetry of their stories, isn't it? These two quiet witnesses, with their single recorded lines, managed to frame two of the biggest ideas in all of Christianity: the incredible closeness of God's presence and the unmistakable identity of God's Son. They're proof that you don't need to be the loudest person in the room to make an eternal impact. So it leaves us with this final thought. Which is more vital to faith? The honest question that digs deep to understand, or the sudden confession that just sees what's true? You know, maybe the real lesson from these two quiet apostles is that a healthy, living faith actually needs both. It needs the courage to ask the tough questions and the humility to embrace the truth when it's standing right in front of you. Thanks for watching.